This room, the room I'm gonna show you today, is quite possibly my favorite room in the entire house, and yet it's the one that was not really planned for. It was one of those that it didn't necessarily need. It's just so beautiful. The house originally it's called like a 4x4 craftsman, which just means it's a box on top of a box. And like on the top floor is supposed to be all the bedrooms, bottom floor is all the living areas. So just looking like pulled back at the architecture, we're like, can we balance out this wing with another structure? So thus the idea of the sunroom was born. Archiform, Anna and Stefan, they got busy drawing up the plans and we didn't know where to put this room. It's like, which way to configure it? So they did 3 or 4 different options. And then once we connected it with the back porch and the front porch, then it was very clear where it needed to go. So essentially we built this from the ground up. We started with foundation, with framing. We had to get all like engineered and permitted and all that kind of stuff. So the rest of the house has lap siding, and we felt that this was a good opportunity to do something texturally different. So we had the whole outside clad in brick. I secretly just really wanted a beautiful room to write in, to meet with my team, to, of course, throw dinner parties. So it was more just like that, like that desire coming from my stomach to make this really pretty room that like the kids don't come in, it's just like my space. So the living room was really dark. We were gonna lighten up the whole house for sure, but this is a room where I could control how many windows and skylights and just make it the most beautiful natural light. So we have north-facing windows and east-facing, which means most of the day it's just this really beautiful, even light. I felt like this room was an opportunity to do something incredible with the windows. It's a sunroom, right? Windows are like a huge architectural element in this room, so let's do something awesome. So the upstairs windows were diamond pattern, and then the rest of the newer windows on the first floor were more of a simple, just classic grid pattern. So for this room, we wanted to figure out how to marry these two designs. After sketching it out, and we did a bunch of options, we came up with this configuration, which does in fact marry the diamonds on top and bottom with the grid in the middle, and I just think it's so beautiful. And like from a distance, it really pulls together all the windows in the house. So we worked with Sierra Pacific on these windows, and they were so wonderful because doing something custom like this can be really challenging, and they just turned out so perfect. The real coup de grace here, the feature of this room and maybe even this whole house is the tile. This was like 2 years ago. We were locked down, and I knew that we were designing this room, and I didn't have all these tile samples, so what my kids and I did is we painted a bunch of paper in different blues and whites, and we tried to create like the super unique mosaic tile floor for this room, but doing it from another state and with paper. The whole thing was hilarious how we were designing this. Ultimately, I went through a billion different mosaic patterns, some that people have never seen before, and then some that were more classic. And we had a pattern, and we were looking at the renderings, and I was just like, I don't know. I don't feel totally confident about this. And tile is one of the most permanent things in your house. You can't just like switch it out. It's a thing. So at the last minute, I was like, hold on, let's just do something classic, but in a bold color. So we worked with Pratt & Larson on customizing this color, and it's like the most beautiful bright blue, and offsetting it with white, of course. We went with just a really classic diamond pattern, but then we did this border. The border was my most favorite part. I just really feel like it takes it next level. So the border, trying to figure out like how many little squares versus little pencil tile versus like that was a thing. So shout out to Stefan for helping us figure that out, because all of these little pieces have to be ordered separately. And we wanted to go with 3 colors instead of just 2. So it's really subtle, but you'll see that there's bright blue and white, and then there's this more medium-ish bluish gray that just gave it one more dimension. So I knew I wanted a more oval table, like one that has a rounded edge, but we couldn't fit this like huge oval table, so it had to be more what's called like I think a racetrack shape, where it's long and skinny like a rectangle, but then instead of it being hard on the ends, it's like a little bit of a curve. So I customized this table through LC Green. They already designed it, but I needed very specific dimensions because this room is long and skinny. I didn't want it to feel like a boardroom table or a conference table, but I also didn't want it to be so skinny that you couldn't fit like platters and place settings. So we got the exact dimensions that were perfect for this room. I also love this table because it's like this really pretty reclaimed wax pine. It's just like, it feels kind of farmhousey and casual, but there is enough detail on the curved leg to make it feel classic and a little bit traditional. It just feels special. It doesn't feel like your basic table. It doesn't feel like a basic farmhouse table. It feels just perfect in the space to me. Now the chairs. It's very challenging to find 8 dining chairs that would work in this space. I first wanted vintage and I went online, I mean for probably, I'm not joking, like a year and a half trying to find 8 matching vintage chairs that I loved. I just couldn't do it, or I couldn't afford it. So I knew I wanted comfort. I knew I wanted something that felt really solid and like big enough that people wouldn't feel nervous sitting on it. I wanted fabric or upholstery for comfort reasons, but also to bring in another color and another texture. And then I also wanted it to have a round or soft edged element. Because of the room with so many squares and the dining table, I really just wanted a shape. It was so hard to find. And then one day, Crate & Barrel launched this new collection with Athena Calderon, shout out. And I was like, oh my gosh, those are our chairs, those are our chairs. I ordered them, still sight unseen, by the way. They weren't in stores yet. So I was definitely nervous, like, are these gonna arrive and are they gonna work? So they arrived, and I am not joking you. We brought all 8 in, put them around the table, and I could have cried. They're so perfect. This room instantly became the room that it needed to be. I think the modernness of the shape, which is kind of like this contemporary postmodern shape, contrasts so perfectly with the traditional legs of the table. At the same time, the wood looks like it doesn't match, but it looks so good together. It came together like that. Finding the right lighting for this room was a tiny bit of a challenge because the ceiling is vaulted. I had to choose something that could really hang down, so I found these 2 pendants from Rejuvenation. I love this shade. The glass shade, the shape of it is just so fun. It's classic, but it's not that expected. It's like a little bit Art Deco-y. So then we put it on this chain. So the chain helps them hang perfectly exactly where we want them to hang over the table. And then for the chain, we chose this unlacquered brass, which right now it looks really shiny, but over time it will patina and have a lot of age. I get fairly greedy when it comes to natural light. It just makes a room sing. It's like a designer's best friend is natural light. But you don't want to necessarily have so much light that you can't be in a room, you know? So this room, because of where it's oriented on the property, I knew we could put in the windows and put in these skylights that without making the room crazy hot or so bright that I had to wear sunglasses. We originally had skylights in the plan, and then we were like, what are we doing? We don't need, I mean, this has like 9 windows in here. We don't need skylights. They had it all framed up. They had the windows in. And then when I was standing in the living room, I was like, oh, this room could have more light, because I was hoping that the light from the sunroom would help make the living room brighter. So at the last minute, Archiform framed in these Velux skylights. I'm so glad we did. They create just like a really beautiful ambient light all day long. So we have this one blank wall, and that's an opportunity for storage. So we needed a piece of storage to put a bunch of stuff. Finding the right piece was kind of hard because it could only be 19 inches deep. Otherwise it would stick out of the wall. Long story short, it took me a long time to find this piece, because I didn't want it to look like a buffet, but I didn't want it to look like a TV stand. So just like getting all the proportions right for this room was challenging. So this piece is made by Crump and Quash. They're makers outside of DC. And I love the dark wood because it mixes it up from the light wood of the pine table, makes it feel a little bit more eclectic. At the same time, it pulls your eye over there and really holds and grounds that wall. Because the legs on the dining table did have more, you know, they're turned, they have some detailing on them. I wanted to keep the credenza fairly simple because I didn't want 2 competing detailed legs, if that makes any sense. So this credenza has this really pretty shape that's very quiet, but it does look more special. It's not basic at all, but it's just like subtle. I've always said that of anything in the house that I would save from a fire besides my children and my pets and probably all my scrapbooking stuff, it would be this blimp piece of art. I got this piece when I was like 23 as a stylist in New York. I couldn't afford it. It was $200 at the flea market. I went back every Sunday for like 4 Sundays, and I got it down to $190, then $180. I think I eventually got it for like $160. It's big. So I had to then get it on the subway, and it wasn't framed at the time. So I'm on the subway with this like, huge piece of art, just whatever, just looking like a weirdo. And I put it up in my apartment in Brooklyn. We moved to LA. I moved 4 times in LA. Finally, 10 years ago, I could afford to actually frame it because it's huge, so it was really expensive. So to me, not only do I love it as a thing, but it's just so sentimental because it just reminds me of the 20 years of like where I was when I started as a stylist 20 years ago and where I am now. This is where I didn't know where to stop. Like, this is a sunroom, right? So you could put 1 billion plants, and you can, that's definitely a trend right now. It's just like plants everywhere. And part of me does want to do that, but then there's still a lot going on in here, and even because there's so many windows, there's so much greenery outside that the more plants I started putting in here, the more I was like, whoa, this is starting to feel overwhelming and a little claustrophobic. So I tried to keep it simple. I have 3 powerful plants. They all kind of ground the corners. They add this beautiful sculptural shape, obviously this bright green color, which I love, and I can keep 3 alive manageably. Like, I can do that. You might be wondering why there's a 6-foot tall wooden bird in here, and that's because I collected him at a flea market probably 8 or 9 years ago in LA. It was one of those flea market finds that I was like, oh, well, I need this, and there's 2 of them. I was like, I think I need this, and my friend was like, oh yeah, you definitely need this. So I got it home, and Brian's like, what'd you bring home? And I was like, ta-da! I love this bird. It was on our old patio in LA that just everybody freaked out about it. It just brings so much whimsy to his face. So then when we brought it up here, I was like, does this go in the sunroom? And we put it in the sunroom yesterday, and I was like, oh, she's found her home. I think this room really does the day to night situation really well. So during the day, it's this workspace, right? And I love sitting in here. I'm one of those people that likes to stare at a window when I'm thinking, and so I just sit in here and stare like for hours every day. And then at night, if we were to have people over, it does turn into this really elegant, but not stuffy, I hope, dining space. The whole room, it just works so well together. It's very functional. Like, it's a great place for us to meet and hang out and talk. I can spread out all my work wallpaper samples. Like, it's just a really functional room for me to work at. And then the fact that like we can entertain, I've never had a dining room like this where you can have people over, have it be its own space, not mess up the kitchen, not even be able to see the kitchen. I really just think that of all the rooms, I think I can say this, well, I'm gonna say it, is I think I nailed this one. And I can't say that about every room. So this isn't me going around and being like, nailed it, like, but this room, I feel like I did. I just love it so much, and there's not one thing I would change. All right, y'all, if you're into these long form videos of our whole farmhouse remodel and you want to share it or like or subscribe, that would really help. And it also keeps us motivated, keeps us really excited to keep doing it because I'm having so much fun doing this. And the more you guys kind of engage, it just makes us feel really good. So thank you very much for watching. Bye.